I survived a plane crash back in 2007 at approximately between 1,000 and 1,200 feet indicated on altimeter. My engine flared up at altitude. And so my first alert was that I looked out the left-hand canopy window to my left here, and I saw a thin streak of visible yellow-orange flame. And I couldn't quite believe what I was seeing. I had to kind of look and look again. You know how people say I had to do a double take to picture it, and that was me. In my mind, it was clear. It was an engine fire. So there I looked down at my feet on the rudder pedals and I saw flame lapping around my feet and my ankles. It was, I won't deny, a very scary place to be, because suddenly, remember, I'm still at altitude significantly, approximately 1,000 feet above the ground. And suddenly I'm now seeing flames lapping around my lower limbs. And I was thinking fast, and I'm trying to sort of process it all in my mind, taking it all on board. And initially I did feel quite flustered about this situation. And I did sort of initially start to panic, thinking, oh my God, I have got to get this aircraft down. I've got to get this aircraft down. And I'm descending still and watching altimeter through 900 feet, 800 feet, 700 feet, 600 feet. Altimeter is spinning down, and I'm very conscious that I'm losing height rapidly. But as I'm doing so, the fire is building up within the chamber of the small two-seater cockpit. And approximately about 500 feet, I was sort of, kind of processing what was going on. And I could clearly visibly see that the fire was now about belly height, so about halfway up within the chamber of the cockpit. Fortunately, I couldn't really feel the heat and the intensity of it burning me, because there was some slight through draft with the ventilation ducts from the dashboard of the cockpit. So that was drawing in air and cooling, but probably not good in the fact that it was probably feeding the flames as well. But I basically made a quite a hasty decision about the half the height drop, so about 500 feet, because of the height of the fire now in the cockpit and where the fire was sitting around close to mid-chest. I figured that I might not make it, in all sincerity. So at that point, I decided to veer away from the concrete below, and I purposely headed towards a softer, grassy stretch to the left-hand side of the concrete runway in the distance. I'm heading now for a large expanse of grass. And I systematically and simply followed what they call the emergency flight drill, or the emergency protocol. And I shut everything down, kept gliding in, was conscious to scrub off as much airspeed as I dared by sort of continually pulling back on the stick and pushing forward again. Approximately, I was like Jack Rabbit. I'd already removed my headset, and I'd unbuckled my three-point harness by that stage, over the shoulders and around the waist, and I'd already opened the left-hand canopy door. So approximately 20 feet, quick as a flash, I got onto the seat. I then clambered out through the open door aperture to my left, climbed onto the low wing, onto the left-hand side of the aircraft, and then I got out onto the wing momentarily, looked only at the horizon, and knew not to look down, and then clapped my hands together above my head in the prayer position, and then I jumped out, taking a giant leap from the trailing edge, the back of the left wing, and snapped my feet and knees together in the air. And I guess the rationale, or the decision to do that, came from my strong training that I'd received as a former British paratrooper, and indeed former member of UK Special Forces as a soldier. So I was, even though the fact that I managed to jump to safety, and I estimate that by the time I physically left the trailing edge of the left wing, I was about 15 feet in the air still, and I was gliding or running in at about 30 knots. So that's about 32 miles per hour, 15 feet above the ground. I landed feet first, thrust forward, smashed my face on the relatively soft ground because of recent torrential rainfall, but it was still a hard smash against my face. But the worst of it, for the record, is I was 63% third and fourth degree burns to total body surface area. I was airlifted to Orlando Regional Health Center. And for the record, many of you may not know, but Orlando Regional Health happens to be undeniably one of the world's top tier medical facilities on the planet. I mean, there's no argument about that. They get a lot of burns in that facility, and I happened to be one of them almost 15 years ago. All of the experts, they came to my aid, and they looked after me 24/7, around the clock for 6 months. They put me in drug-induced coma. The cost, incidentally, on insurance, thank God, was almost 2.7 million US dollars. And that was 15 years ago. So given inflation, you can probably work it out in today's US dollar. After 6 months, they deemed it safe to further repatriate me back to London. I spent a further 1.5 years, so 18 months further, in various burns units. I went on to have 63 surgeries under general anaesthetic. So in other words, the doctors had to put me to sleep 63 times to repair the damage. Orthopedics work, which is bones, plastics work, plastic surgery, human donor skin, pig skin, synthetic skin, my own skin, a lot of artificial skin, human cadaver skin. What a lot of people don't know is that all the skin I might have had from other surgical volunteers or, human cadaver, it doesn't last. It gives me temporary cover. My body will reject it because it doesn't match my own skin's DNA. And this is the problem, right? But it is great because it gives me temporary cover. And so what you see on the face is the result of a lot of my own personal skin grafts that actually eventually took and gave me like permanent skin cover. But that wouldn't have happened without a lot of stepping stone operations to give me temporary cover until I was ready to take my own skin for the personal skin grafts, as it were. I essentially had to learn to feed myself, to write my name all over again because my hands were somewhat crippled for some time, to learn to walk all over again. And in a lot of the work that I do, engaging with audiences and public speaking, I've come to realize that a lot of my own recovery was driven, yes, in part by the medical services and the great work that the doctors and the nurses and the specialists do. But also, in part, you have to be motivated. And that is driven purely and simply by mojo, or human spirit. I lost my mojo for a period. I won't deny that. So after about 18 months, I felt like the boxer in the ring, and I wanted to give up the fight. And quite honestly, you know what? I was tired of taking the punches. I was tired of taking the blows and the knocks. I couldn't do it anymore. If you understand, I could not keep up the pretense of that fight day in and day out with the doctors and the specialists and all the surgeries. I just wanted to throw the white towel into the ring. There was an option for me potentially in Switzerland with sort of legal euthanasia, as it were. And I genuinely started to look into that process. And I became enthusiastic about the possibility of dignified assisted suicide. Somebody from the church came to my aid, manifested some trust and built a bond with me. And I was able to talk about it sort of one-to-one, sort of man-to-man with this individual. And eventually I managed to pull myself out of that long, dark pit of self-pity and self-despair. I had to start testing myself as an individual. And I not only learned to walk, but really started to walk quite long distances. By the end of that year 3, I walked some 2,500 miles. That's simply put walking about 8 miles per day. It paid me to be busy, and it paid me to push my body in the physiological sense, and that improved the quality of my skin and my healing. And then I went on to participate in some challenges. I did London Marathon. How am I going to get around 26.2 miles of the London Marathon course, the circuit? It took me 8 hours, 30 minutes to get around that course. And a good buddy of mine somehow managed to blag me a place on the New York Marathon. And there I was, I'm on Staten Island. And I remember thinking, wow, this is amazing. You know, this is like, how far have I come on the journey to be crossing that big bridge from Staten Island back into Brooklyn? And I was a very lucky guy, that I made it and I managed to pull through. And I'm also a really keen scuba diver. So in the dive world, I'm certified as a PADI course director. And I teach kind of at all levels for the industry. And I also, on occasion, have the good fortune of leading bespoke individual expeditions for either small teams or indeed one-to-one. And that takes me around the world. For example, I just led a very disabled gentleman out to the Bahamas, who was an ex-Afghanistan veteran with loss of both limbs above the knee and also traumatic brain injury. I recently came back from Norway, so one of the countries in Scandinavia, and I was supporting an expedition for a program called Curtis Palmer Program. And they support blue light service emergency personnel, so police, fire, ambulance personnel that may be suffering with some mental health trauma or difficulties, or indeed some of those individuals that have been diagnosed with terminal illness. So we did, in a nutshell, we did 3-day trekking in the low-level mountains of Norway, followed by 4 days paddling down the fjord systems on the kayaks. One other thing that I'd like to mention also, if you found the general kind of synopsis of my story interesting and you'd like to get more out of that, then there is a great publication that I've been very fortunate to have released this year. Life on a Thread depicts a true comeback survivor's story, and it's my story. So I have been back flying a plane once again. I applied for a couple of scholarships, and one of which I did receive, and I was very fortunately sponsored by the aircraft company Boeing. So I'm now licensed to fly hot air balloons and airships specifically. And you know when you watch the start of a movie and it says Paramount Pictures, and you see the mountain and you get the angle of that mountain scape. Well, that mountain is a famous mountain called Monvisa in the Italian Alps in the north. And I was training flying the balloon in the vicinity of that. So in a way, I've come full circle. I'm sort of pinching myself back there at altitude, enjoying that freedom and that exhilaration of flying solo once again. And life was definitely not what I expected in a nutshell. But what I will say, life is definitely what you make it. Believe me, from my own testimony, with great will and determination, all of us can effectively surprise ourselves and drive that narrative forward. But if you do get tossed off, get back on and keep going. And that's what it's all about. That's what I've learned firsthand. And that's how I've managed to make the most of it and kind of develop a successful version 2.0 of Jamie Hull.